Good morning. At least it's morning where I am. I don't know what time of day it is where you are. Just going to have a sip of tea. And today I wanted to play a bit of country guitar for you. And this video has come about since earlier this week I was listening to what I think is one of my favourite country records or country rock records. And that's the Byrds' Sweetheart of the Rodeo. And this record is from 1968, and it's where the Byrds properly turned country. It's where Graham Parsons came on board, and I think it was one of the first kind of proper country albums that I got into. And then from there I digged a bit deeper into country music, and I listened to the kind of people that were influencing the Byrds and Graham Parsons. And I was playing along to this record, and I was just trying to make some of the great pedal steel licks that you can hear on the track You Ain't Going Nowhere work on the guitar, and I was kind of semi-successful. Some of them seemed to work quite nicely, others didn't really want to translate onto the guitar, and what I ended up doing is putting together a little country solo which is half based on the licks that you hear in the track and half of it's just my own kind of thing, and put all of that together into what I hope is a nice country guitar solo, which I'm going to play for you now, and then I'm going to break it down for you. So there we go. Now the song You Ain't Going Nowhere, for those of you not aware, is a Bob Dylan tune. Though I think the Byrds were the first to record the track, and Dylan only recorded it a few years later. I think you can hear that on the Basement Tapes album. And I certainly first heard it as a Byrds track, and it's still my favourite version of the tune. Now, as I said, my solo is a little bit of a hodgepodge of some of my own material and then some of those pedal steel licks that I've taken from the original recording. And if you listen to that record, there's some amazing pedal steel playing from a man called Lloyd Green, who is one of the great pedal steel players, I think, and he's played on thousands of records with all kinds of musical legends, and well worth checking out if you don't know the name. Anyway, let's take a look at this solo, and I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm going to take you through all of the licks, but I'm also going to be talking about some of the concepts and techniques that are going on behind this solo. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about playing over a chord progression, about chord tones, about scale choices, and also some of these country guitar techniques, so pedal steel style bending and use of open strings. Let's begin by talking about the chords that we're playing over, and we're in the key of G major, and it's a nice simple 3-chord song, this one. We've just got G for a bar, A minor for a bar of C, and then back to G for another bar. So it's a repeated 4-chord loop. And that's the same for the entire song. It's the same for the verse and the same for the chorus and for the solo section. So nice and simple. And if you're a beginner looking for a nice, easy song to strum your way through, then this would be a really good one to check out. So what we've got here is the 1 chord in the key of G, and the A minor, that's the 2 minor chord, and then C is the 4 chord, and then we're back to the 1 again. I think it's super important when you're playing country music, or when you're playing any kind of music really, to be aware of the chords that you're playing over. And not just to be aware of the key center, but each of the individual chords, and to know which chord you're playing over at any given moment in your solo. And then you're able to really bring out and describe the sound of each of those chords. So when you hear any great country guitar solo, they're rarely just playing the key center, so they're not just going to be playing G major or G major pentatonic, but they're going to be thinking chord tones of G or scales that fit the G chord, and then when the chord changes, they're going to be thinking A minor chord tones or scales that fit that A minor sound. And that's something I'm going to try and talk about when we're going through the individual licks of this solo. Let's jump in with the opening lick of the solo. So I've taken this straight from the recording, and we've got a little pickup phrase to start with, and I'm starting around the 7th fret. I'm kind of thinking about the G chord here, so you could think in terms of this C form of the G chord shape. I'm starting on this high D, then jumping down an octave, then we just got a little major scale melody really. I think that's just G major scale. And then we're into our first bending lick. And this is one of those classic, very widely used country bending licks, and I in fact did an entire video based on this lick, which I'll put a link to above. But here we're bending an A up to a B, and we're catching this high D note on the high E string. And in terms of the function of the notes here, we're bending the second up to the major third against a G chord. So, and then coming out of that into our next lick. And for this we're playing over the A minor chord, and we're bending a G up to an A, and I'm playing a B on top. So again, the function of these notes, I'm bending up to the root of the A minor chord, and we've got the second on top, which is a nice sound. Then we're going to a C chord, and the lick is this. So here I'm probably thinking C major pentatonic, and we're just bending a D up to an E, and we're holding that note, and then I'm playing an A and a G on top. So bend, hold, and then come out of the bend. And then I'm continuing with this idea. This is a lick of my own, and we're back to the G chord here, and really just thinking chord tones. So starting on the B, which is the third of G, and then I'm coming down this end of the neck. So here you could think G major pentatonic, and I'm kind of targeting this B note here, and I'm using this technique where you're going above and below and then hitting your target note, and it's an idea that you can find quite a lot in country music, also in jazz music as well. People call it enclosure or encircling or targeting, but the basic idea is we're aiming for this B note here. That's the third of the chord that we're on, and I'm just playing a fret above, a fret below, and then hitting the target. Then I'm headed back up the fretboard, so back to this G position, and this is all just G major arpeggio. So, and then some major pentatonic notes. And then we've got this. So this is over the A minor chord. And it's all chord tones really, it's just coming straight out of this A minor triad shape. And I'm just kind of hammering into the root note. I'm barring on the top two strings at the 8th fret, hammering down my third finger onto the root note. And then the first half of the solo wraps up with this lick. So here we're back to the C chord, and this is really a classic kind of C major pentatonic country lick. So that's the first half of the solo. Let me put all of that together slowly for you. We're heading into the second half of the solo with this lick. So starting off in this same G major position, G major pentatonic, we've just got a little chromatic passing tone in there as well. Then we've got some G major chord tones, so really just thinking G major arpeggio here. I'm starting on the B, then we've got D, and then hitting that high root note. Then the next lick, So A minor here, so thinking out of this A minor chord shape, I've got the root note, bending that up to the second, so an A bent up to a B, and then I've got the D and the C on the B string. So I'm bending, hitting that high D, releasing the bend, and then hitting the C. And the next lick. And this is one of my ideas here, and it's just using some open strings to create that nice cascading, chiming kind of effect. So we're playing over the C chord initially. So just bending a B up to a C, so it's bending the major seventh up to the root, and I'm holding down that high D on top at the 10th fret on the top string, and then really just coming down the G major pentatonic scale. But what I'm doing is, where possible, I'm replacing some of those notes with open strings to create that nice chiming effect. And if you've not experimented with this kind of thing before, I have done a video previously on open string country scales, which is kind of what I'm trying to do with this idea. So we're starting on the B, and got B, A, G, and then instead of playing an E here, I can play an open top string. So, and then I've got a D, and again I can replace the B note here with an open second string. So, and then I'm coming down to the 2nd fret, an A, and another open string, an open G there. So we've got, and if you're doing it right, you can get all of those strings ringing at the same time, and you get that kind of piano with the sustain pedal pressed down kind of effect. I should mention that I'm using hybrid picking for this lick and for a lot of this solo as well. So pick and middle finger of my picking hand. So it makes those string skips much smoother, I think, if you're using that kind of technique. And also with some of the other licks, you can snap the strings and get a bit of that chicken picking kind of a sound. So with this lick, it's picking fingers here. Next lick, and this is inspired by what's on the recording, though it's not played exactly, and I'm just thinking G chord tones here. So we've got a D and a G coming down to a B and D, then we got some fourths, so it's 14 on the G and 15 on the B. Then just moving that shape down 2 frets, and then the final lick. So into this little box shape here on the top 2 strings, frets 15 and 17, and this is kind of played over the C chord going back to the G, and you could think of that box as being C major pentatonic, or it's also G major pentatonic. Those notes are in common between the 2 scales. So it's just a simple lick like that, just got a semitone bend. And then for the final little phrase, got a little country bending idea. So I'm playing at the 13th fret on the top 2 strings, and I'm just bending the B string, pulling off to the 11th fret on the B, and ending on that B note, just hammering into that note, again hitting the chord tone of the 1 chord. Let me put all of the second half of the solo together for you then. me take you through the gear that I'm using today, and no surprises that I'm using my Telecaster through a Fender Deluxe for that classic country sound. My Telecaster is a 52 reissue. I've had this guitar for a long time. It's a 90s reissue Telecaster, and I do sometimes get asked if I've made any changes to my guitars, but this one is pretty much all stock. I've not changed the pickups or anything like that. Maybe I should try changing the pickups in some of my guitars. It's something I've thought about but never really gotten into. It's one of those things, it's hard to know if it's going to make any major difference until you've gone to the expense of buying the pickups and installing them, and it's not something you want to make a mistake with. So I really don't know if that would make any improvements. I'm fairly happy with the stock sound of the pickups in this guitar, and the only other thing I've changed is the bridge, which I've replaced for one of the compensated for intonation style bridges. I think that's a Callahan bridge that I've got on here, but it's still a 3 saddle brass bridge, so I think that preserves the original tone of the guitar whilst improving the intonation situation a bit. Amp is my Fender Deluxe. I'm just going into the normal channel. I've got the volume set to about 6, so the amp is just starting to break up naturally, and I've got the treble on 3 and the bass is on about 6. And once again, I'm going through my UA aux box just to attenuate the volume slightly, and I've actually just turned it down by 1 notch on the aux box, and it seems to me that the more you attenuate, the more you seem to lose a little bit of the character of the original tone. I think the UA aux box sounds really excellent, but I try not to attenuate by too much. So here I've just got it turned down by 1 notch, and the amp is still quite loud in the room, but it's not unbearably loud, and it's kind of comfortable for me to sit next to it and record. And I'm just using one pedal, which is my MXR Dynacomp, which is my kind of go-to compressor for these kind of country sounds. Let's have some sounds then. So this is the Tele going straight into the Deluxe. So you can hear that it's very touch sensitive, and it can be a clean sound or it can be a dirtier sound depending on how hard you attack the strings. And that's one of the beautiful things about a Fender Deluxe, I think, set around 6, is that it's really responsive to your playing technique. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoy learning to play this solo. And as usual, you can find my tab and my backing track up on my Patreon page. And you can pay what you like, get access to this tab and loads of other tabs as well. I've built up quite a library of stuff there over the past couple of years. Thanks very much for watching. I shall see you next time. Bye bye.